But in India, it seems to be that we haven't actually had any big takeoffs of the mobile models, which is surprising because historically what used to happen is Indian companies used to struggle with getting their product out to market because they had to go through operators. And operators used to take their pound of flesh in the margin because that's the only way you could get to the consumer. Now with the advent of global app stores and instant global distribution, that seems to have changed, and you would expect more Indian companies to actually have higher margins, have higher scale, and even actually go outside of India. But again, it's been somewhat limited. The other piece, I think, that we've seen at IDG is around what type of models have worked. So in internet, transaction models in India have worked. Advertising hasn't because there hasn't been a critical user base, and subscription has had, some success. So another question that looms is, in mobile, what is the monetization model that will work? Because, again, that's been a challenge in India. Is it transaction? Is it advertising? Is it subscription? Theoretically, advertising should take off in India because the user bases are much larger, and advertisers get interested once there's a minimum user base. And on the transaction size, we expect that to happen, but it's a little bit more complex, around payments. And on the subscription side, remains to be seen. WhatsApp is the first big subscription-based company in the world that's kind of commanded a large market premium, and so we see more people doing that. So I just wanted to set some context so people have a perspective on kind of what's going on in the mobile world. So let me start with Vipin and Bhavesh on the B2C side, which is, if you look at both your companies, from what I understand, 60, 70, 80% of revenues are coming from mobile. So they're essentially mobile-first companies, but they also have an online component. Could you talk through for entrepreneurs as to what does it take to build a mobile-first company? How does it differ from an online company in terms of what users look for, what product architecture, and then how do you measure success? Are the metrics different? This broad question, because I think entrepreneurs who are thinking of building these companies would benefit from that.
So I'll start off with a very simple concept that we leverage when we think of ourselves as a mobile-first company. On the mobile, you're very close to the user. So he's given you access to his wallet in a way. And when I say you're close to him, you have access to his location, you have access to his contact list, you have access to him through a simple push notification. Right? So he's always just one step away. And these are tools that you can use to build your product and design upwards from these, compared to the web where it was always a very detached kind of an experience when you compare it to the mobile. So that's the base of how we've built our mobile experience. And luckily for us, the business that we are in, the product that we sell is very close to a mobile use case where people are on the go when they need to use a cab. So that's helped us a lot in leveraging these technologies. So location is a really important thing for us, and we've in our app you can book a car from wherever you are. That's the good side of mobile. The bad side is because the consumer has let you in so close to him. It's number one, costlier again, and number two, he is a much more high maintenance customer. You shouldn't spam him on push notifications. You shouldn't use his location in the background unnecessarily because his battery will just die. There's a lot of things you need to take care of because you're so close to him.
I won't push too much for your USPs and try and find out how to win.
So we actually started as a web-only company 4 years ago. And 2012, we started focusing on mobile, which was now close to 1.5, 2 years ago. And I think the biggest learning for us has been that mobile is a completely unexplored territory still today. Yet it has the maximum potential because the rate at which smartphone penetration is growing and the kind of users that a smartphone user can be is very, very valuable compared to a web user. So how it affects value when it comes to what you have as an app on the phone. So understanding that has been a big humbling experience, a learning experience for us. At the same time, how do you get discovered? Today, as more and more users are getting added on the smartphones, it's not just a bigger market, it's also a discovery problem. Because everybody is focusing on mobile. So how do you get discovered in such a competitive environment without actually spending a lot of money or working out channels of acquisition which are cheaper. That has not been figured out in the industry in general when you compare it to the web. And I think that's a great opportunity for a lot of startups which can actually come into this space. As we have, I mean, we have come here to the scale of around 100,000 transactions every day. And we have done it without actually spending a lot of money. I mean, we didn't have money to spend because we never raised funding. So, while the Flipkarts and the Snapdeals of the world or the Make My Trips of the world try to become leaders on mobile, there is a strong opportunity for a lot of startups to build mobile-first use cases. And, to actually, because it's an unexplored territory, so you can actually do a lot of new things, do experiments, and maybe something will work out. And so that's my perspective.
I'll just pick up on that, from the venture capital side of the house. I think, we've been spending time on that. And the question we keep asking ourselves is, okay, in the online world, there were a bunch of global platforms, and they won in India. So, how is it that anybody's going to compete with them, right? So things like, a search or social networks or what have you. And e-commerce is the one that took off because half of its value chain was actually something that someone outside India without bodies in India couldn't do, right? If you look at logistics, sourcing, warehousing, etc., just half of the value chain in e-commerce and UI product tech. It's hard for a foreign player to do e-commerce in India without having people in India. Whereas there are certain business models where you can actually do it without having a single body in India. So when you look at mobile, right, do you think that is starting to happen also, which is there are, the global players will dominate in India, and are there pieces within the segments, whether it's utilities or entertainment, that a global player cannot win in India or will require lots of people in India to get done?
There are a lot of opportunities in India which only Indian companies can solve, I think. Of course, if you wait for too long, somebody will come and eat your lunch. But I'll give you an example of an app called News Hunt. It's a local content app, local news app, where they publish news in a lot of different regional languages. It's one of the top apps on the Play Store in India. That's an example of a play, which is totally Indian and can be done probably only by an Indian company, who understands what kind of content, a regional user wants. Similarly, when you talk about payments, for example, India, a lot of accepted payment methods which are there globally, like whether it is PayPal, whether it is Google Wallet, they don't necessarily work for the majority of Indians who are on mobile, on smartphones today. So that's again another space where, due to some regulations also, only Indian companies can and have the opportunity to innovate and build something new. E-commerce, again, if you see today, there are hardly any global players as far as the mobile play is concerned. So, again, the point I am making is that in every field that is there in India, everything is open. It's all virgin. Even today, while many people are developing apps, the scale that has been achieved today on mobile is still far too less compared to the potential that exists. So anybody, starting a new idea, a new concept, and the good thing about mobile and smartphones, and like digressing a bit, is that unlike the web, since the acquisition channels are not worked out, if your app works, it can really go viral, which is not how it works on the web anymore.
Okay, let me shift gears. There's lots of great points when you brought up there, and we can kind of delve into each of them. Let me just shift gears and say that, okay, so we always talk about consumer opportunities, and even when you hear the global press, etc., it's usually about consumer opportunities. But there's also an enterprise opportunity. And if you look at recent IPOs in the US, they've probably been equal on consumer and enterprise. So enterprise is coming back. The challenge in India has been enterprise companies on the, let's say, non-mobile but PC have actually not done that well. There have not been that many kind of hits out of India in enterprise software. It's changing. There's some people who've gone through the kind of India and emerging markets, lower price point, lower functionality type of proposition to the market and have had some success. There's some who've kind of gone to the US and put a services wrapper around their product offering to differentiate. But it's been few and far between. And then there's these new gen companies in cloud that are coming out that have actually had some success. So maybe talk a little bit about what is the state of the enterprise market in India today, in general, license versus cloud, because you guys have done a lot of cloud. And then from an access standpoint, on mobile versus PC and tablet, what are the dynamics you're seeing? And last, do you think startups in India who are doing this can actually focus on India alone and become big, or do they have to go global?
Okay, first let's, I got a little bit different take on the mobile first strategy. It depends on what's your target audience, whom you're trying to solve, and so on. So let's say, example, in the instance of MobiKwik and Ola Cabs, their business is focused on mobile-centric focus, right? So if it's great if you have an app like an Instagram or a Facebook, etc., and so on, where your customers are there on the mobile. I'll give an example of how we started our journey in India with QuickBooks, which is a cloud-based online financial management software. We focused first on the cloud, got users, got traction, had an engagement model in place, drove adoption, iterated very fast on the product, got it right, and then we said, okay, let's have a mobile app, and we're looking at that mobile app as more of an engagement rather than an adoption. Okay. So that's how we evolved QuickBooks in India. We started our journey from a cloud-first, mobile later, to a cloud-first, mobile too. So what my point of view is not just mobile-first, but maybe the smarter thing could be a mobile too strategy. The second point which Manik you answered is how big is the cloud market in India? By about 2014, the cloud market is supposed to be close to about 400 million US. The SaaS market, that is software as a service, that's supposed to be doing about 150 to 175 million dollars, and supposed to grow to about 500 million in the next 3 years. So that's phenomenal opportunity for startups and looking at this market. From a market sizing perspective and what companies like Intuit, why it makes sense for us to focus on this market. If you look at the market, there are about close to 30 to 35 million small and medium business in the country. Okay? They're contributing close to 20% of the GDP. They're growing at about double-digit growth in the last 4 years. They're employing close to 200 million people. Okay? And we've seen that the small business are very progressive, they're very innovative, and so on. So that makes sense from an IT spending perspective. Small businesses are investing about close to $7 billion in IT spending every year and growing at double digit. So it absolutely makes sense for domestic startups and also MNC startups like us to focus on the SMB market in the country. And what we've seen over the last 1 year, you said, okay, you're not seeing much traction, because a lot of companies are there, but they are below the radar. Okay? You're not doing huge, 20 million, 30 million revenue, etc., and so on. But there are a lot of players in the enterprise space, especially in the cloud space, especially in the SaaS space, in the telecom space, who are doing really good things. And I know a lot of companies who are doing that. What we've seen is over the last 1 year, close to about 35 companies, cloud startups, have been started in India over the last 1 year. So there's a lot of traction you will see in the cloud startups in India.
So let me just push a little further. How has your product spec changed for India? Feature sets, architecture, etc. And what can the audience learn from how the enterprise market in India differs from the West, and therefore what more Indianized products or more India-specific or emerging market products would resonate?
Sure, absolutely. So one is, you really as a startup really need to define what's your target audience. You have to be absolutely, be focused on what's your target audience and go as narrow as possible. So let's say example, if you're focusing on a consumer, then hey, I'm looking at a consumer like Manik who earns X lakh rupees based in a tier 2 city, etc. and so on. Or if you're looking at an enterprise, then what vertical you want to, play the game. So you have to be seriously, very, very narrowly focused on a target audience. You'd also pick your battles, not internal battles, but lead with what SKU, what problems you're trying to solve for. If as a startup, the one danger is if you have too many problems you're trying to solve, too many products, too many verticals, too many customers, then prioritization might suffer and might lead to failure. So what we done in Intuit is, when we came to India, we focus on one single vertical in one single city, that is Bangalore. Okay, we said, okay, let's work in Bangalore. Let's go with one vertical, that is IT space. Let's get our customers there in that particular space, learn from it, get our product right, iterate, grow adoption, and then move on to the subsequent verticals. So even now in India, after about 1.5 years, we're there in only about top 6 cities in the country.
I want to ask you a slightly, so you're the big guy on this, this panel in terms of you got money, right? And you got a large MNC behind you. So what, just bear with me on this, what would Intuit want to buy? What type of company would Intuit want to buy in India, which is solving things that they're like, this is damn hard to solve? What are those 2-3 things in India and enterprise that are so hard to solve that, a startup that can nail that would be at least worthy of your attention?
Yes. So if you look at what's Intuit's mission is basically to be the small business, operating system. So either, where we need to fill product gaps with respect to having an end-to-end offering for small business, those companies would make sense for us. Wherever there are product gaps which we feel needs to be addressed, so those kind of companies is where Intuit is looking at.
What's the hardest problems to solve?
Is actually delivering an awesome product experience for a customer. That's critical. That's super critical for India.
All right, I won't push you any further. So I think we got a little bit of the perspective on B2C and B2B and the dynamics from kind of user and product standpoint. Bipin, maybe if I can ask you to talk a little bit about the state of mobile payments in India. I mean, so let me just pull back, right? So as entrepreneurs here, choose to build startups, they, one decision is consumer versus enterprise. Another, if you look at kind of enabling technologies, right? Payments is one of them. Advertising is another. There's a bunch of enabling technologies you could start. But payments is something that historically has been a challenge in India, right? You've kind of been sitting between one greedy bugger called a bank and another greedy bugger called a telco, and you're sitting there getting squeezed in the middle, plus you have all this regulatory stuff going on. So what is the state now? Where are the opportunities? And do you see it changing in the next year or two?
So if you see what has happened in India is that the user has progressed faster than the enterprises, specifically the financial institutions, which means that user has adopted new technologies, has adopted smartphones, has started using apps, whereas the payment infrastructure that exists even today, which is comprised of primarily of banks, right, and the banks connecting each other with Visa, MasterCard, or a net banking kind of interface, that has been developed by companies 10 years ago. And those softwares are being, used today for electronic payments. So what it means is that, those systems just don't scale for mobile. They hardly scale for web for 2014, but for mobile, they definitely don't. So we strongly believe that, alternative payment mechanisms like the wallet that we have created become a strong enabler in, getting users to pay on the mobile. And so one example of a traditional payment problem is that when you use a card on the mobile, you can't do a complete stored card kind of solution in India because it's mandatory to enter CVV and expiry, and it's mandatory to have a second step of authentication, which actually goes to some bank's browser. In the browser, you have to open it within the app. That's a terrible experience when a user is already ready to trust you, with his money. So how do you solve such problems? So we have created a specific solution, which is an e-wallet, an M-wallet, where users keep money with us, and then they use it to do their most frequent transactions. So whether it's recharging a mobile, whether it is making a bill payment, or potentially, let's say, booking an Ola cab, or ordering grocery, booking a movie ticket on Book My Show. Ideally, if you have a smartphone and if you have the Book My Show app or the Ola app, pressing one button should enable you to make that payment, right? The current payment infrastructure doesn't support that. And, I think that is a huge opportunity, not just for us. I think there are many, and since it's all early days, there are many potential different ways of solving the same problem. And then maybe the users will figure out what is the best way, or maybe multiple methods will flourish.
Bhavesh, if I could ask you a similar question, not from a payments company standpoint, but from someone who is collecting money from consumers, are there particular strategies that have been effective in collecting money? And let me broaden it out from business model, we talked about earlier, from transaction, advertising, and subscription, and I'm not sure what range of business models you have. And then within, your particular dominant payment mechanism, what has worked and what has been challenged?
We've tried a bunch of things. Predominantly our payments are in cash, and that's not the preferred way for consumers to pay a taxi cab fare, because there's a lot of spare change that you have to pay, and it's so much of a frequent transaction. You use it almost every day, but you would prefer a much more integrated and seamless experience. So we tried a wallet, and I think we realized that the algorithm was out. So now we're talking to a bunch of players like MobiKwik to integrate that. So people, when we tried that, people loved that experience.
You tried a single app wallet for using
single app.
Okay.
So we saw that whoever came to know about that, the conversion rates to paying, depositing money with us was really high, and we attributed that to the fact that our use case is so frequent. There's a lot of frequent use you need to make of transport. So people like that. We also tried. We have pilot running of card swiping in the cab. We work with EasyTap on that, and that's also something people like. But see, I think the wallet experience is much more seamless than that. And the one single most requested feature is a card on file feature, which unfortunately we can't do.
So I think payments is one part of the challenge in India, monetization. The other is cost of customer acquisition. And let me shift this to the B2B side for a second, right? Historically, if you looked at the SME cloud market in India, which was not mobile enabled, okay, many of the startups we saw struggled with the sales and marketing costs. It was just so difficult to kind of get enough people to convert. I don't know if that has changed now, but is it still quite difficult to get enough SME customers on board to try the thing? How do you guys do it?
It's not. If you look at what you can do on things on the web, from creating an awareness, discoverability, etc., and so on, there are various ways which you can do on the web if you have a cloud offering, right? From a natural search, paid search, social, email marketing, etc., and so on. The key is once you get in the users inside your funnel, what do you do next to get into a paid subscription? It's like a funnel. So what we've seen that just having a product, even a great product in India, doesn't work. You need to have an engagement team in place. So Indians always, we like a personal touch, even if it's SaaS software. So you have a personal touch, build a relationship, you need to set up their account, onboard them, etc., and so on. So the personal engagements, you need to have an engagement system in place, even if you have a cloud offering in India, to really be successful. So the metrics is really get them on the funnel, which is easier to do. The hard part is obviously engaging with them and getting them to be a paid customer. But we've seen over the last 1.5 years, from a trial to paid subscriptions are really headed true north for us.
Great. Well, I'll thank my panelists, Sriram, Bhavesh, and Bipin, for giving your insights to this audience, and hope everybody got something out of it.